Aloha. It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and all things considered. I'm Dave Lawrence. Frank Vignola, Vinny Raniolo at the Blue Note through Saturday, 6:30 and 9 each night. Then they're heading to the MAC January 11th. Gertrude's Jazz Bar, of course, in Kona, January 12th and 13th. The Hapuna Prince Hotel on the 14th. Wrapping up their extensive Hawaii tour, I might say, on the 15th at the KMC Theater. And we're joined today by Frank himself. I feel a bit underdressed compared with how stellar you're looking. Great to see you, Frank.
Well, at the Blue Note, I'm dressed classy. This is a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. And I heard great things about you from the Blue Note's manager, Marco. He was saying how he's known you for years. Marco came from New York, and we were just together mesmerized watching you do your thing on stage. For folks who are completely new to the experience of seeing you in this guitar duo, kind of paint a picture for what's in store when someone comes and sees one of these shows.
Well, we have, first of all, as a duo, played almost 1,500 shows in the last 7 years. So we're tight. We know the songs we're playing, I think, sometimes.
Yes, you do.
And we kind of focus on just great classic songs, from Beethoven's Fifth, which ironically enough, a lot of the American composers of the 20s and 30s and 40s were very influenced by classical music, and you can really hear it in their music. And, like we take Beethoven's Fifth, the first section of it, it's almost like a gypsy jazz progression. Right. It's in minor, it's A minor to D minor to E7, and it's like a normal progression. So it's great to take those songs and kind of do our thing with it. And then, of course, the classic jazz material, some gypsy jazz. I mean, we have so many influences that it's hard not to, it's hard just to play one period of music for us because there's so many great songs and people like the variety. I think as an instrumental artist, it's important for us to play songs people know. It's kind of a, step in the right direction.
Yeah, you dropped some Louis Armstrong into that first set.
Well, Louis is the father of jazz as far as I'm concerned, so.
And some Zappa I know you like to play.
Oh, my introduction to rock and roll was Studio 10. Never forget putting on that 8-track in my car and hearing Let Me Take You to the Beach come out.
Frank is also one of these guys who can just blaze on an acoustic guitar, almost like Yngwie Malmsteen style, but with an acoustic. It made me wonder as I watched the set if a couple names came to mind. I just wanted to see. We mentioned Frank, but further into that category, where would Tommy Bolin and Eddie Van Halen have any place in your?
Eddie was a huge influence on me as a teenager. Listening to what he did with one guitar in that Van Halen group was just it was groundbreaking. People. No one had done that before. Right. And now everybody's copying it. Right. And I think that's the sign of a true genius. And Eddie is a true genius.
How about Tommy Bolin?
I'm not that familiar with.
Remember the Billy Cobham Spectrum record?
Oh, well, anything with Billy Cobham is just ridiculous.
He's in purple for a little while in the end.
Right, okay, yeah.
Probably when you were I'm thinking when you were graduating high school.
Yeah, no, I will do a little research now, though.
No worries. And on that note of research, I was doing some research. Musical family that this cat's got. There's no wonder that he would end up playing, but it was, I'm reading, accordion, banjo, and trumpet were some of the instruments around you. If you can explain some of your first memories of being exposed to music and maybe beginning that process of gravitating toward it.
Well, my father plays tenor banjo as a hobbyist. And he, played with different Dixieland bands. So naturally, he was into record albums. So he would play Les Paul records, Django records, Charlie Christian records, Bucky Pizzarelli records. And when I was about 5, my mother played accordion. My brother started playing trumpet. I'm like, I want to play something. So they gave me a guitar. He showed me the chords to Limehouse Blues. I'll never forget it, from the Django record. And I would play along with that record for, hours at a time. And then I had a great teacher from the age of 7 who turned me on to Joe Pass, Herb Ellis, Charlie Parker. And he would send me home with records and say, okay, learn this song. So he trained my ear, at the same time teaching me how to read. So I was very, very fortunate to have had such a great, education as a youngster. And I knew from day one that this is what I wanted to do with my life. There was never any question in my mind that this is what I wanted to do with my life.
That's incredible.
Here I am in Honolulu at the Blue Note playing. It's almost like a dream, really. I feel so blessed, so lucky.
Well, you're very blessed, and you're blessed with an incredible gift too. And so it was guitar first. I had understood it was banjo, which I know you got some accolades on your playing at a very young age.
Well, I was started on guitar, and then naturally I played a little banjo. And my father entered me in the Canadian National Banjo Competition. So there were 3 Indians and a bartender who entered, and I happened to win. So I think that's the accolades they were talking about. But I mean, I play a little tenor banjo, but guitar is my real instrument, my true love.
How far is the banjo from the ukulele?
Not very far. I mean, the guitar is closer to the ukulele than the tenor banjo. The tenor banjo is like a cello, tuned in fifths. So, and that's what the guitar replaced in the big bands, because the tenor banjo used to be the rhythm chord instrument in the big bands. Duke Ellington, Paul Whiteman. And then the guitar came in, and everybody was like, well, duh, a little fuller of an instrument.
Wow, I never really knew that. And so that's it's because I would always associate banjo with more, I guess, country music and stuff.
Five-string. Right, 5-string.
But there was that place in jazz, too, way back.
Yeah, way back in the teens and early 20s.
What was it that helped you gravitate towards this unique style of music that you like to play that is, it's not just playing acoustic guitar, right? There's a certain kind of thing that you do, because when people like Madonna or Ringo Starr or anybody is Donald Fagen, trying to get a certain sound, they want to call you to do it. Can you give us a little insight into that part of it?
Well, I really committed to swing guitar, for lack of a better term. Guitar from the 30s, that era of music, I've just always loved it. I've just always loved the songs, Irving Berlin and George Gershwin, and committing to that style just from the heart. At an early age, I was one of the few people doing it in New York. So whenever someone would need someone who played 1930s style guitar, call Frank. So one day the phone rings, it's Madonna's people. Madonna wants to do a record of the 20s and 30s. You interested? Of course. Donald Fagen, I need a solo, swing style solo on my next record. You want to do it? It seems like a dream when these people call. I remember when Donald Fagen called, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was my friend Joe playing a joke on me, because he knew I was a big Steely Dan fan. And he, phone rings, hi, this is Donald Fagen. I was like, yeah, right. But it really was him, it's funny.
That's good stuff. Well, that leads me to the next area I was curious about, because I got to talk to you about some of the stuff on the phone before, but we're having a whole new interview, and people, no doubt, don't remember our last conversation. So you mentioned the Material Girl, and in a lot of these cases, we had Kenny G on the show recently, and he's been blessed to play with a number of different heavy cats, but as you probably already know, there are a lot of occasions, even before the modern digital era, when people would just record independently of one another for the same session. So even if you're on a record, like taking his thing, for example, with Frank Sinatra, you may not actually get to record it in his presence or at the same time. So thinking about, we'll go through some of these cats. You mentioned Madonna. Was that an opportunity where you actually got to record at the same time that she was recording?
The same time. It was part of a independent film she was a part of called Bloodhounds of Broadway. A Damien Runyon short story that they put to a film. And the music was from the 20s. So we were in the studio, and they were singing, her and Jennifer Grey. And to her credit, she sounded great. She sounded great, like a real singer.
And is she directing what you're doing? Does she have like a producer who's sort of riding herd over?
There's always people running around telling everybody what to do. I have no idea what they're talking about. But when it comes down to it, so it came down to, give me a D minor, boom, and then we played I Surrender Dear together. So, it was very, very good stuff. And, I was 19 at the time, so I was just really, starstruck. I remember we had lunch together at the session, and she sat down with me, and we were talking like a normal conversation. I'm like, wow, this is wonderful. Then we both got food poisoning.
Really?
Bad mayonnaise, yeah. So that's how the day ended. We're both in the bathrooms.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny stuff. You can't make this stuff up.
No, you
can't make this stuff up.
And that was the only session with her? Was just knocked out one quick thing?
One quick day, yeah.
That's really cool. Well,
yeah, it was cool. It was great.
And how old are you?
I'm 51 now. I just turned 51.
Guy looks like he's like 30 or something.
So
I don't know
I can't believe I was just thinking in my mind. It was 32 years ago. Vinny's 33. He was 1 when I. Whoa! Time marches on, my friends.
Right,
Very
right.
Quickly, enjoy every moment if you can.
Wow. Well, you're doing something right over here. There's no question about
Playing good music, playing good songs.
Well, that's part of it. Ringo Starr is another. I mean, that's when you're working for the Beatles. You know, you've arrived, so to speak. Was that in the studio at the same time? Or?
In the studio at the same time with Leon Redbone, believe it or not. And they did a Hawaiian song, the Hawaiian Honolulu Baby, or some kind of song that Leon wrote. And it was so silly. And I just remember sitting there like watching Ringo and thinking like, you know, Let It Be and all these unbelievable songs, you know, and here he is singing Honolulu Baby, joking around with Leon Redbone, and I'm just playing a little guitar. Again, just funny stuff. The big, when I worked with Les Paul in New York City, everybody in the business used to come down to see him. And one day, who walks in? Paul McCartney with Heather, when he had Heather for his wife, in a tuxedo. And out of all of the big rock stars who came down to meet Les, he was by far the classiest. And he knew every song we played. He knew all that whole repertoire because his father was a huge fan of traditional jazz. So he knew the whole repertoire. He was singing along in his seat. And I was like, wow, this is, again, unbelievable, surreal, being on stage and there's Paul McCartney at your feet singing along to I'm Confessing That I Love You. It's just great moments, you know.
And just to put some context on this, so this is, from what I understand, you had a regular gig working with Les at the Iridium in New York.
Every Monday night, Les was the man. I knew him for many, many years. I met him when I was, I think, 18 or 19 in New York when he emerged from retirement. And I went down to hear him and got to meet him, and we were friends ever since. He used to talk all the time. He was fascinated by picks. Oh, my God. We must have spent 100 hours talking about picks. I used to buy him books on picks whenever I used to see him just because he was so fascinated with them. He would look at this one. He'd make his own picks out of different materials. Here, try this one, you know, and I'd try it out. And he was really, really into it. 24/7 with him, with guitar.
Had you already done the Ringo session when you got to do this thing where McCartney sat in with you guys?
Yes. Yeah.
So here you are, you're like, wow, now I have done half the...
It's unbelievable, I know, and that's the biggest, you know, the Beatles. I mean, as far as songwriting goes, I mean, those two will go down in history like Mozart, in my opinion.
How many jams did you do with McCartney?
We just did one in the dressing room.
So he didn't play on stage, but
He told a story. He told a story about he and John's first gig as the Beatles. The pub owner wanted them to play Les Paul material. So they had to learn How High the Moon, and they learned a bunch of Les Paul tunes so they could get their first gig together as the Beatles. Is that a great story?
That's a huge story.
It's huge, right.
And that makes sense. He'd want to tell that to the audience, kind of like remind people what a valuable thing this is. You're getting to see Les. And then what, you guys are like in the dressing room hanging after?
Right. I made sure because I knew the dressing room door would be locked, so I made sure I was in there before it got locked. And then, you know, had my guitar, and I had heard those tapes of Paul singing Sheik of Araby. So I started to play it, and he came over and he sang it, and he was snapping his fingers. I was like, again, this is great, you know. I didn't sleep for a week after that. I didn't. I came home, I was up all night. My wife wakes up. Next morning, she's like, what's the matter? I'm like, I met Paul McCartney last night. It's like, all right, see you later. Go to work, you know. Funny.
That's huge validation for
Well, it's just... You know, for a music geek like me to be able to have the opportunity to not only meet these people, but then to make music with them. I mean, that I learned more from sitting on the bandstand with Les Paul than any music book or music class or any study I did. I learned more just from sitting 2 feet away from him playing music together.
Well, man, of all guys to get a lesson from, between his recording genius with the multi-tracking to his playing, I mean,
most people don't realize that many people were fooling around with the technology of multi-track recording or sound-on-sound recording at that time, but none of them could play guitar like Les Paul. So he was able to do things with that machine that no one could even dream of, and that was the new sound at that time.
That's how Herb Alpert was telling us. We just had Herb, and Herb was saying that that he told you.
He told me the same story, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, that he was studying how high the moon or whatever, and figuring out, all right, now this is going to help me, and that's how he developed his own sax sound, by going home and taking his own little multi-track in his home studio and developing a series of layered, like developing a piece using a series of layered tracks.
And he would double himself, so it sounded bigger, and and you could hear it on when you listen. When I would listen to his tracks after that, I was like, "Oh, that's how he got that sound. He did it twice, put them together."
It's incredible. And then before we get off the last thing, any other huge cats come and see you guys that just stick out, even if they didn't sit in with you? Just the fact that you're standing there with I mean, I know a lot of people would come in that place, but some of the ones that just come to mind.
Well, two were Danny DeVito, huge Danny DeVito fan, and he came in and just lit the place up.
Telling jokes.
Telling a couple of jokes, but off the cuff. He was just making stuff up. It was brilliant. And then also Scott Carpenter, because he would talk about being in space and looking down at planet Earth and seeing the damage that was being done to it from up in space. And he kept telling the people, because he would come down frequently, and Les would get him up every time to tell this story, and he would say, please take care of the planet, because he saw a view of it that none of us have ever seen before. Just very striking, very touching,
Well, it's huge when
it was so heartfelt. You could tell he really cared about, please, do some things to take care of this planet. It's not in good shape.
No, and do you when you have an opportunity to reach people and you speak on behalf of the planet and the animals, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I was always very excited to hear him come up and hear how passionate he was about that.
Yeah, you don't forget it, and here you are. You're giving his message legs, and it's an important one, especially as they. I forget which organization, but National Geographic was just reporting next massive wave of extinction. The sixth mass extinction is just around the corner if people don't stop. Both the damage to the planet, but also certain species that are just being poached off the planet.
Frogs, they're almost done.
Well, rhinos to follow, elephants, tigers, pangolins. I could be here.
Tigers and bears. Oh no!
Right. As before we wrap it up with you, for a guy who's gotten to play with so many cats and do so much, be so in demand because of the specialty that you offer, what are some things on the horizon that you would, even if you don't have any plans necessarily with cats, but things that you would, maybe people you would like to get a chance to work with, just things that you haven't yet done that you aspire to, that you kind of look at as a goal?
Well, I'm always looking for people to play with, because it's there's so many great players out there, especially a lot of the younger players that are coming up are just ridiculous. As you can hear in Vinny, I mean, there's a slew of people out there all over the planet. One person I'd love to do a show with is George Benson. Mm-hmm. I've met him a bunch of times. We've played together, but he's the king, in my opinion. He's the king. So I would love to get to do some playing with him. We used to have a place on Hawaii.
That's exactly right. On Maui, he had a place, and he's got a huge. He's great to ask questions because he'll tell stories that local people just really get off on because he's got all the names down and stuff.
Yeah. Well, he's a big star,
And how'd you know that he had a place there?
Say that again.
How did you know that he had a connection?
I don't know. I think I read it somewhere.
Okay. No, that's true. He had a kid born right on Maui. I mean, he lived here like full time. It was hard for him, but some celebrities make it work. Some are better at doing it than others. Frank Vignola, Vinny Raniolo, and they're continuing their run through the islands. I hope that you've had fun. I certainly have, and really appreciate your time getting to connect with you today here, and you being my guest on All Things Considered.
Dave, it's an honor.